It is 7:05 p.m. on Wednesday, July 15th, 2020, calling a special city council meeting for fiscal year 2021 budget submission. This meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A, Section 20, and the City Council's vote to waive Rule 21A on April 7, 2020. This meeting will be held live streamed on the Bedford Cable Access Facebook page. Opening of the session is by myself, City Council President Joseph Lopes. In attendance is Linda Morad, Councilor at Large and First Vice President. In attendance, Brian K. Gomes, Councilor at Large and Second Vice President. Councilor at Large Naomi Carney, Councilor at Large Ian Abreu, Councilor at Large Deborah Coelho, Councilor of Ward 1 Brad Markey, and Councilor of Ward 4 Derek Baptiste. We do have one letter to be read into the record by Maria Giesta, who is not going to be able to attend the meeting due to a family emergency. Motion to receive and place on file.
So move.
Made by Councilor Gomes, second by Councilor Markey. All those in favor, opposed, have it. We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilor at Large Brian K. Gomes, if you don't mind, please do the pledge for us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We also have an attendance. I apologize. Councilor Gomes, thank you. We also have an attendance. Councilor Ward 5 Scott Lima. I apologize. I didn't see you on the screen. So item A is a communication, Council President Lopes to City Council Farias, requesting that a special committee city council meeting is called for Wednesday, July 15, 2020 at 7 p.m. for the submittal of the fiscal year 21 city budget.
Motion to receive and place on file.
Made by Councilor Morad, second by Councilor Abreu. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Mayor Mitchell, normally we would send two people to get you, but due to COVID, you're already downstairs in the Ashley room. So Mayor Mitchell delivers his fiscal year 2021 budget addressed to the members of the Bedford City Council. So 1A through 1H, fiscal year 21 budget orders referred to the quasi committee of the whole will be in order after the mayor speaks. Mayor Mitchell, normally the podium is yours, but the Ashley room is yours to begin.
Very good. Very good. Good evening, President Lopes, honorable members of the City Council, department heads, and residents of New Bedford. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you the city's municipal budget for fiscal 2021. Ordinarily, of course, I'd come before the council in May in person to propose the annual budget, and the council votes to adopt the budget in June. But this is no ordinary year. No one imagined that a pandemic would upend virtually every aspect of our lives in a matter of a few months, cause over 100,000 deaths in the United States, and plunge the country into the depths of a recession. Generally speaking, New Bedford has responded effectively to the crisis. Given the city's older than average population, the pervasiveness of underlying health conditions, and our industrial workforce, we have managed the first curve of the pandemic better than anyone could have predicted. I'd like to thank the council for its support along the way for our overall efforts and for standing behind our residents who have responsibly adjusted their daily lives. Nevertheless, there has been tremendous loss and hardship. Over 100 of our residents have died from COVID-19. Over 2,000 people have tested positive, and hundreds have fallen seriously ill. Our unemployment rate skyrocketed from 5% in February to 24% in May. Behind these numbers are many of our fellow residents who have suffered the loss of a job or even a family member. Not surprisingly, the disruption to the national economy will have a direct effect on municipal finances here and everywhere else, as virtually all major sources of government revenue will have contracted. Unlike other cities, we've been able to weather the last few months of fiscal year 2020, despite precipitous drops in the city's meals, hotels, and excise tax revenue. We've been helped by our conservative approach to budgeting and certain proactive steps like the freezes on hiring and discretionary expenses. But here, as everywhere, there is considerable uncertainty ahead. Until a vaccine or enhanced therapeutics are widely available or herd immunity is established, there will continue to be a wide range of economic activity in which people will not be able to engage. This will tend to depress the national economic recovery and remain a drag on municipal finances beyond this year. How much so is anyone's guess. Because annual budgeting is essentially an exercise in predicting the future. The uncertainty around future municipal budget revenue makes the budgeting process difficult. But there are a few things we do know. First, state aid, which represents 53% of the city's operating revenue, will inevitably be cut, perhaps significantly. Every reputable state budget analyst predicts that state income tax and other revenues will be down sharply this year. This includes the Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation, which predicts that the Commonwealth's revenues will decrease by a whopping $6 billion. We've waited longer than most municipalities to formulate this year's budget so that we could discuss the state of our finances closer in time with the state's budget decisions. In constructing the budget, we have assumed, based on feedback from legislators and state budget officials, that unrestricted state aid will be about $1 million lower than this past fiscal year, and that education aid will be level with last year, which is significantly lower than what it would have been after the passage last year of the Student Opportunity Act. In response, the school department has already tightened its belt by reducing the budget it originally proposed for this coming year by over $10 million. Whether this reduction is enough remains to be seen. Second, as we look across city government, there aren't obvious cuts to be made. That is, there aren't programs or services we can readily cut back and still maintain their viability. We're down to bare necessities in municipal services because of the slow buildup of budgetary pressure over many years. New Bedford has experienced chronically tight finances in part because of expensive state mandates, as well as the city's own unwillingness to make tough decisions years ago. Chief examples of these pressures are the hundreds of millions of dollars of deferred road and building maintenance, along with retiree obligations that are enormous now because they weren't funded adequately in the past. At the same time, we have not been able to grow our way out of our fiscal challenges. While unemployment dropped considerably over the last several years, that did not translate into significant levy growth. In recent years, we've done all we can to manage these pressures. We've budgeted conservatively, and we've achieved tremendous efficiencies in city government, including through our nationally recognized solar energy program and other measures. And we have managed city government effectively, so much so that Standard & Poor's gives us the highest rating for municipal management. But efficiencies and effective management can only take us so far. The upshot is that as we confront the budgetary implications of the pandemic, our struggles with previous budgets have effectively squeezed out all the nice-to-haves in municipal government. Further reductions require more difficult decisions. The third major assumption in this year's budget is that simply pushing the problem onto taxpayers is neither appropriate nor realistic. The property tax burden directly affects the quality of life of our residents and the competitiveness of our businesses. Too much has been imposed upon them already. Fourth, the cost of government continues to increase, even in the midst of a pandemic. Personnel costs are rising as a result of labor agreements, which, as you will see, are reflected in the year-over-year increases in most department budgets. Pension costs continue to be an enormous strain on city finances, and as massive as they already are, they are increasing at a faster rate because of the slower projected growth in the pension fund's investments. It also hasn't helped that the city's retirement board has consistently voted in cost of living adjustments that exceed the rate of inflation. New Bedford isn't alone in these challenges. Cities across America have already taken dramatic steps to balance their budgets. According to a survey conducted by the National League of Cities, since the start of the pandemic, 74% of cities have made cuts to their operating budgets. And a staggering 1.6 million state and municipal employees have been laid off or furloughed. The National League of Cities survey further found that 1/3 of cities intend to lay off or furlough still more employees. And as we hear this news, we can't help but be reminded that New Bedford's financial pressures are more intense than those faced by most cities. In light of these four considerations, the fiscal year 2021 budget is austere to say the least. For one thing, it is shorn of new items. The only exceptions are legally mandated expenses, or expenses like computer virus protections that everyone would agree we cannot responsibly exclude. To balance the budget, we are forced to rely on this past year's free cash, along with $2 million from the stabilization fund. I am reluctant to use stabilization funds for the operating budget. But if there is a year to do it, it is this year. Many other cities, including in Massachusetts, are taking a similar approach. Nevertheless, the use of stabilization to support the operating budget is not a sustainable practice and should be used sparingly. The details of the budget lay in the budget book, and Chief Financial Officer Ari Sky and the individual department heads can walk you through it. Suffice it to say, it's a more restrictive approach than in recent years. The problem is that it still may not be enough. If our assumptions about state aid are correct, a business as usual budget would result in a sizable tax increase on residents and businesses. And that's the case despite our having to resort to the use of free cash and stabilization funds. If later this summer the state aid numbers turn out to be lower than we are forecasting, we'll be right here talking about deeper cuts. If, on the other hand, state aid comes in higher, let's say it comes in at exactly what it was last year, we still would be raising taxes and using free cash and stabilization funds to balance the budget. One wild card, of course, is the prospect of a large infusion of federal aid. Later this summer, Congress will be considering a set of stimulus proposals, all of which face stiff opposition in the Senate. The arrival of federal funds to sustain municipal operations certainly would be a welcome development, but it wouldn't address the more fundamental budget reality prompted by the pandemic, which is that we're not talking about a one-year challenge. Again, there is a general consensus among economists that the economic recovery from the pandemic will take several years. One-time federal money may provide a year's worth of relief, but right now we're staring at a multi-year challenge. So the fiscal 2021 budget must include multi-year solutions. Pretending that one-time fixes, including the Band-Aid of federal relief, is insufficient and would be irresponsible. When the expenses you're trying to reduce will reappear or grow the next year, we will leave the city in an even weaker position if we ignored them when we had the chance to fix them. And I will not let that happen. So where might the city look to deal with a multi-year problem? Where in the budget can we pull back without materially compromising services? The answers are not easy to find, but I'm confident that the budget we have prepared offers a path forward that achieves current year and multi-year savings while avoiding layoffs. It will not, and eases the burden on taxpayers and still puts us in a position to make key investments in the city. So let's take a look at how we get there. And you may want to reference the pie chart that was emailed out to you earlier, which you're all familiar with by now. For the record, the proposed fiscal year 2021 budget is approximately $411 million, of which the general fund is the single largest component at approximately $365 million. We've been over this before, but it bears emphasis. Only a small fraction of the total budget is available for reductions. Approximately 3/4 of our general fund is predetermined by state mandates and regional assessments. Most of that spending is in our school department, which represents about 40% of the general fund. Because we budget that department at the minimum under state law, something I know none of us are proud of, it cannot be reduced. You'll note that healthcare is one of the major non-discretionary items. We have some control over that, but we've been unwilling to use it. We spend much more per employee on healthcare than most cities and towns in Massachusetts. While most of these cities, including nearly every municipality in southeastern Massachusetts, have adopted the state's healthcare reform statute, the council twice has declined to do so. While the terms of employee healthcare should not be altered now, that is in the middle of a public health crisis, this was clearly a missed opportunity that is making it harder for us to manage the intense budget pressures we now face. So our range of decisions are limited to the operating departments. All the services the city provides, aside from the school department and the enterprise funds, make up only 25% of the city's general fund budget. Half of that is public safety, and the other half consists of operating budgets of the other 30 departments. Cuts to those mostly small, non-public safety departments could effectively eliminate the delivery of important services, but yield little in the way of savings. For example, if you cut one position from a department of 4 people, you won't save much money, but you might well cripple the department's ability to carry out its core mission. This year, we have no choice but to look at all departments, public safety and non-public safety alike. The goal is to determine where meaningful savings can be achieved, not just for the next year, but for the long term, without materially compromising important services. We believe that we have found a set of reductions that meet that criteria. While some of these cuts may seem at first to be painful, they will not compromise services, and they can be achieved without resorting to layoffs. First, we have taken a close look at how we spend resources in the largest general fund budget other than the school department, namely the police department. As a starting point in the analysis, we looked to the recent strategic review of the department, which identified areas where efficiencies could be achieved without compromising public safety. In particular, the report emphasizes that we should continue to reduce the number of police officers assigned to desk positions and put them on the street, where they provide the highest value to the public. The report also recommended the consolidation of stations and noted that the trend in policing is away from fixed district stations and toward consolidated headquarters where police can be deployed in greater force more readily to the places where the data says crime is likely to occur. The report further explained that district stations also create other inefficiencies, including a duplicative command structure, which diminishes effective coordination and communication. Historically, district stations are also staffed with a front desk, so they require extra manpower just for that task. Part of our assessment included a review of how other police departments in Massachusetts deploy officers across stations. So our police department reached out to all the members of the Major City Chiefs Association, which is comprised of the police departments of the 36 largest cities and towns in Massachusetts, and asked them how many district stations they had and whether they were staffed full-time. The answer couldn't have been clearer. Aside from Boston, New Bedford is the only city, I underscore, the only city that has full-time district stations. And we have 3. The only other city that has any district station is Lynn, which is not staffed full-time. So yes, even Springfield and Worcester, with populations over 150,000, have only a police headquarters. When it comes to the utilization of police stations, New Bedford is behind the times. Except for big cities, nobody does business the way that we do it. So we have an opportunity to deploy our police more effectively and save the city money in the process. Accordingly, based on our review and the chief's input, we are going to consolidate the downtown police station into the police headquarters on Rockdale Avenue. We, of course, will continue to conduct community policing and foot and bicycle patrols in the downtown, especially during the busy summer season. Even with the station merger, we will have more district police stations than any city and town in Massachusetts, except for Boston. In addition, we are redeploying the desk officers at all district stations. As the other cities in Massachusetts have figured out, people tend not to report crimes by walking into a police station. They pick up the phone and they call the police. They've been doing it this way for a long time. The North End and South End district stations will continue to be otherwise staffed. Anyone who wishes to speak to a police officer in those stations can still walk up and do that if they don't want to call. There just won't be a sworn officer sitting at the front desk all day long. There are a total of 9 officers now assigned to desk duty at the satellite stations, 3 for each 8-hour shift. They will be reassigned to patrol duty. At the same time, we will eliminate 9 vacant police officers, 9 vacant police officer positions. In so doing, we will save the city about $620,000 annually when benefits are factored in, without reducing the number of police on the street. I hasten to note the savings are not being diverted to other programs. We will use approximately 1/3 of the savings to invest in 2 other key areas of the police department, namely the acquisition of police cruisers, which are very much needed right now, and a smaller amount for training. Neither of these things are luxuries. The rest of the savings will be just that, savings. Apart from the police department, reductions or realignments in other areas must be taken. We are going to close the Ashley Park Senior Center. While it is understandable that this will disappoint those who use the center, activity at the center has fallen significantly in recent years, as most of our senior programs have been consolidated into the Buntwood Park Senior Center and the Rosemary Tierney Community Center. These days, virtually everyone who utilizes our senior centers drives or is driven there, so seniors will still be able to avail themselves of the programs we offer. We're also going to achieve long-term savings by consolidating the payroll and accounts payable functions in city government. Right now, we have employees in over 30 departments who are responsible for administering payroll and processing accounts payable requests and reporting them to the auditor's office. This 1950s era organizational arrangement is highly inefficient. Our plan is to eliminate through attrition the positions devoted to these functions across city government, while staffing up a much smaller number of positions in the auditor's and treasurer's offices to absorb the load. The savings will not be immediate, but they will be significant in the long run. We also have looked at our fire department. Earlier this year, before the pandemic arrived, we made a long overdue change to the way the fire department is utilized. Over the last 40 years, the number of structure fires has dropped by more than half, which has prompted our fire department, like many of its counterparts in other cities, to respond to medical calls. This is an appropriate practice when the medical call is a true emergency, but the majority of 911 medical calls are not emergencies that require a fire response in addition to an ambulance response. The diversion of the fire apparatus to a non-emergency medical call is a considerable drain on resources. In recent years, the medical calls have come to represent a remarkable 70% of the fire department's responses, the majority of which were non-emergency calls that also received an ambulance response. It is highly wasteful. It is also dangerous. A fire apparatus responding to a non-emergency call on one side of its coverage area may be in a less advantageous location to respond to a real emergency on the other side of the area. In light of this, the fire and EMS departments work to change the protocols used by the city's emergency dispatchers such that the fire department would no longer join with the ambulances on medical calls unless it's a real emergency. As a result, the number of medical calls that prompted a response from the fire department plummeted by nearly half in the last quarter. Some of that trend may be attributable to a drop in emergency medical calls during the height of the COVID surge, but emergency medical calls, again, are a small fraction of all the medical calls. The fire and EMS departments conservatively project that the fire department's responses will decrease by 3,000 calls this coming year. This will allow us to reduce the fire department's overall footprint without materially compromising its capacity to carry out its core mission, namely preventing and putting out fires. So we believe we are in a position to comfortably reduce the fire department by one company, leaving the city with 8 active fire companies. This represents a degree of coverage that is consistent with cities in the Northeast. As points of comparison, Brockton also runs 8 fire companies. Fall River still runs 9, but it does not impose a minimum staffing of 4 men per apparatus, something which our fire union has never been willing to entertain. So it has a fire department, Fall River does, so it has a fire budget that is $3.3 million or 17% smaller than ours. As it is with police stations, so it is with the deployment of fire personnel. New Bedford has been behind the times. Based on input from Chief Cordair, the apparatus to be taken offline will be Engine 8, located on Acushnet Avenue. The rationale for this selection is that at the same station there is a hybrid engine and ladder, which can continue to serve effectively the same area of responsibility. We also must look at the long-term future of the fire department. Right now, a new public safety center on Brock Avenue is under construction and will be open next year. The first station built in the city in over 60 years. I believe, as I suspect you do, that we shouldn't wait another 60 years to build the next one, and that we must focus on the needs of the North End. So I'm proposing that we use this some of the savings for a feasibility study for a new fire station in the North End. An investment in another modern fire facility will enable the fire department to be more effective in the long run. Altogether, these measures conservatively will save us over $1 million this year, and more in the out years as employees leave by attrition and benefits are factored in. On top of this, other measures such as the privatization of the zoo will lead to still more savings in the long run. Based on what we can foresee, I believe that these measures will be effective in dealing with the multi-year challenge posed by the pandemic. In closing, by making tougher decisions now, we are able, despite the pandemic, to pursue our primary goals, which are to restrain the demands on the tax base, provide first-rate services to our residents, and support the city's steady growth through key investments. And we can do this without resorting to layoffs. Others will look back at this time and assess for themselves whether we, those who are bestowed the sacred trust of the city's residents as elected officials, acted for the benefit of the city in the long term, even when things were trying in the short term. So let us leave them no doubt that we made the right choices when the going got tough. Thank you, councilors, for your consideration. I look forward to our work together in the weeks ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Mitchell. Also in attendance is Councilor of Ward 3, Yu Dunn. At this time, I'm going to take up 1A through 1H, which is fiscal year 21 budget orders, referred to the quasi-committee of the whole. 1A is an order appropriating 340.
Mr. President, you waive the reading of the 1A through 1H
Motion is to waive the readings without objection
and refer the items to the quasi-committee.
and refer them to the quasi-committee of the whole, made by Council Morad,
Second.
second by Council Gomes. Items 2A through 2H are the July's budget to be rescinded and referred to the quasi-committee in the whole.
Same course of action.
Motion is to waive the readings and refer to the quasi-committee of the whole, made by Council Morad,
Second.
second by Council Abreu. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Item 3A through 3H is the August budget to be rescinded and referred to the quasi-committee of the whole.
Same course of action.
Same course of action, referred to the quasi-committee of the whole, made by Council Morad,
Second.
Second.
second by Council Carney. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Seeing no further business in front of us, a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Made by Councilor Carney, second by Councilor,
Second.
second by Councilor Baptiste. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at 7:35 p.m., everyone.